Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. Heldman. This is Thursday, 17th of October, 2024. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about PowerShell. I'm learning right along with you, so I'm enjoying researching this and studying it. And if you want to work in IT, especially if you're going to work in any kind of Windows Server environment, you're going to need to be really super familiar with PowerShell. So we're just going to continue going down the road with a few more videos to learn how this tool operates. Let's get started. It should be a lot of fun. Now, there are two ways to start PowerShell. We've talked about this before. You can go in as a regular user that may or may not have administrative privileges to run many PowerShell applications, or what are called commandlets, or you can run it in administrative mode. Now, to run something, you can use the Win dialog. So if you know the name of the executable that you want to run, you can just type in the Win key, and the Win key on your keyboard looks like the old Microsoft flag, and it's called the Win key. I call it the flag key. But if you do a flag R, that's going to bring up what is called the Run dialog. There it is right there. And you can click OK, and this will launch PowerShell. Now, in this case, PowerShell is not installed in administrator mode. What's happening here is that it is installed, it's running as just regular user mode. If I wanted to run it in administrative mode, what I would do is I would click the Start button. Let me grab that here. Go to All Apps, scroll down until I found the P's for PowerShell right here. And then I would right-click it, select More, and then you have the option here now to pin it to the taskbar if you wanted it pinned. If you don't want it pinned, you could unpin it. But in this case, I'm going to run it as administrator. So I run it, and I get a thing called the UAC, User Account Control. This has been around in Microsoft Windows for quite a while now. And I say, yes, I do want to run that executable. And here we go. We get this in administrator mode. This is what it looks like. And you can't tell a whole lot of difference between the two, but we are running this in administrative mode. Why would I want to do this? Well, there may be some commands where you have to access the system or whatever, and it's going to require the PowerShell be run in administrative mode. I'll minimize this. Now let's clear the screen. So I'm going to type in CLS, and that clears the screen. That's the old DOS command, or the command prompt command. What we can also do is type in clear. That's a Linux command, but it works just fine here. Now let's begin to talk about variables. So a variable is an area of memory in the computer that gets set aside, and it's going to store specific data. The computer knows about it through a memory address, which is usually referenced to programmers. You can see it as a hexadecimal address. The computer knows the address of the data. It knows the type of data being stored. And then what happens is we assign a meaningful name to us so that we can recognize what is inside that memory, because we may not know what hexadecimal address, what kind of data it contains. So we use meaningful names. Now, variable names in PowerShell they always start with a $sign. And there are variables that are known about that are just environment variables or system variables. Like one is called maximum history count. Let me see if I can type that in. History count. No spaces. And it doesn't need to be proper case. What I mean by proper case is the M is capitalized, the H is capitalized, and the C is capitalized. And this is called proper case. It doesn't need to be proper case. By the way, there's a thing called camel case. Let me show that to you real quick. I'll put in a little m here. Let me go back and change this to a little m so you can see this. Little m. And what's happening here is we're saying, well, this is camel case. The reason it's called camel case is because it looks like a dromedary camel. So we come in lowercase m here for maximum, cap H for history, so we go over the camel's hump there, and here's another one. So that's called camel case. You'll see that a lot in coding. I should also let you know that in Microsoft PowerShell, this really isn't needed. You really don't need to type in the proper case commands. You can go all lowercase if you want to. But the salient parts here is I've got a $sign, which is saying, hey, there's a variable out here that I know about. And then the variable name is maximum history count. Please be ready to remember that the computer knows about it by it knows about it by its address. So we hit enter, and it yields a number 4096. What does that mean? Well, as I type different commands into PowerShell, it's going to keep track of those commands. And then I can hit my up arrow like this to get my commands back, and that is the history count. Now, you can set this, so if you wanted it to be a little bit lower, maybe you never envision yourself entering 4,000 PowerShell commands, you could do that. So what you do is you hit your up arrow to get the command back, and you type equals, say, 200. And now what you're doing is you're setting maximum history count variable. This is what I would call an environment variable. It's within the PowerShell environment, or perhaps a system variable. It's within the PowerShell system. I'm setting this to a value of 200, and I hit enter. Now I hit my up arrow to show me the regular count, so I know that it got set, and sure enough it set it to 200, which is great. That's what I wanted it to do. But what now if I want to set it back? I hit my up arrow, like so, 4096, hit enter, and check it just to make sure that the variable is 4096. That, my friends, is a system variable. Let's take a little closer look at setting some variables. So you have a bunch of built-in variables that PowerShell knows about, and then you have variables that you can declare. For example, suppose that you wanted to declare the variable eye color, like that. You could hit enter, and nothing seems to have happened. Now I want to show you something that you should probably consider setting when you're doing this kind of scripting work where you have your own customized variables. Let's take a look at that. I'm just going to turn on what is called strict mode. So I'm going to say set strict ICT mode, and I'm going to put an attack version, and I'm going to say latest. Now you can see that I've got color coding going on here, so this is a modifier that I'm putting in. And then this is the name of the commandlet. This is called a commandlet. Generally speaking, you have the verb and the object. So we're saying set, you'll see get, and some others. So the main way that PowerShell works these things is we have some sort of a verb, and then we tell it what the object that's going to get that verb and do something with it. We're telling it to set it to the latest version, so I hit enter. And then now let me just come back up here and hit eye color again, and it throws an error. Now the point here is not that we did anything wrong. PowerShell is set to be normally pretty forgiving, but what it's telling us here is that we don't have any data in the eye color variable. And so when we just typed in natively $eye color and hit enter, it went ahead and established that variable, but now it's saying, well, there's no data inside that variable. So the way to fix that then, we turned on strict mode here. That means, hey, we're going to go in and we're going to do some scripting in PowerShell, and we want to make sure that it's doing our code checking for us, telling us if we run into a problem somewhere. So that's very good. There's no problem with that, but now we have to fix it. So what I'll do is I'll hit up arrow, hit eye color, and I'm going to say that it equals, and I'm going to put in parentheses blue, and then not parentheses, double quotes. And what this is doing is this is setting eye color to a string value. And I hit enter. And now if I clear the screen and I up arrow and I tell it to display eye color to me, now it shows blue. Now I should point out that this data is not going to change now unless a script or something deliberately changes it. So the computer knows the location of the variable, and it knows that there's a string in there called blue. Now another way that we could do that is we could say set tac variable. And then we could tell it what the name of our variable is. And our name is going to be iColor. And then we're going to set the value. Let's set the value to brown in this case. So that's another way of setting a variable. So you could just say $iColor equals, and then whatever color you wanted, or we could say set variable, the name of the variable. This is called a parameter. We're passing in a parameter here, or an attribute, and we're saying that the name of the variable is iColor, and we're going to change its value to brown. So let's see if that works. Hit enter, up arrow, iColor, brown. Beautiful. So there's two ways of doing this. We could say iColor equals and whatever, or we could use this set variable commandlet, which is built into PowerShell. It needs to know as an argument the name of the variable that we want to set, and then in this case the value of the variable that we want to set. Well, so what would happen if you, how would you find out what variables are actually inside your system? We could issue a commandlet called getVariable, and what this is going to do is it's going to get something, and it's going to get all the variables that we currently have declared in our PowerShell system. And there's a pretty extensive list of these. Here's iColor. You can see how it wound up in the list, and it contains brown. But there's a bunch of other variables here as well. And so this is a good way of finding out just what variables are in play while you're running your PowerShell session. Now, with the exception of iColor here, all of these variables are called automatic variables, which means that you probably don't want to mess with them. You probably shouldn't change them. And so what we did was we changed maximum history count. This is an automatic variable, which we probably shouldn't have changed to 200. We should just leave it alone, which is why we set it back. But you should know that the word for this is, these are called automatic variables because they're automatically stored for our use with PowerShell. They are not variables that we create. Now, there's a funny variable name. It's called null. What null means is nothing. It doesn't exist. So, you know, if there was a 0 in it, it would be not null. There would be something inside that variable. But if there's nothing inside the variable, it's null. And we can set variables to null. This would be good scripting context. The reason for that, and this goes back, harkens back to the old days, a programmer might declare a variable, and the system would go out and find a piece of space on the hard drive that had been occupied by something else but has now been deleted, but the data is still there. And so you would find that it would pull up this odd, weird data, and it wasn't anything like the data type that you were trying to put in there. And so there are controls put in place now that say, hey, you know what? We're going to go ahead and we're going to initialize variables as we declare them. I think that's a good thing to do. But suppose that you don't have any data that you want to put in there right now. Well, you can initialize it with the keyword null. So let's take a look at this and see what this looks like. So I'm going to have a number of toes. And I'm going to do this the proper, this wouldn't even be a good Python programming method, but that's okay. Python likes underscores, but it likes all lowercase letters. And I'm going to say number of toes is going to be equal to 10 toes. And I hit, I'm going to say it's going to be equal to, I'm sorry, not 10, but null. Now what this is doing is it says, okay, I'm going to create this variable. The variable is going to be called number of toes. This is a variable that I declared. This is not an automatic variable. And then I set it to null. Now that keyword there, null, means put empty in there. There's nothing in there, and it accepted it, which is great. So if we come up here and we say, well, show me number of nulls, number of toes, it says nothing there, nothing to see here. Well, so what happens if we come down here and we declare number of fingers? Now what's going to happen is we're going to generate up an error. The reason we're generating that error is because we did not use the null keyword for number of fingers, and so what it's doing is it's good programmer practice. This is a warning. It's saying, hey, a number of fingers is out there. There could be some funky data inside that. I don't know what, I haven't overwritten it, and so it's just going to throw this error, which is good. It's telling us that we have declared a variable, but we have not initialized it. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's clear the screen. And we have an automatic variable called last exit code. So it looks this way. It's all one word. In fact, it's all proper case. Last exit code, like so. And it says it cannot be retrieved because it hasn't been set yet. Well, what this is doing now, it gives us the ability to go out and run an external program. This is kind of cool. And so we could use any kind of executable that we have out there that we want to run. And the exit code means when the thing is done running, it's going to return back a code to us. This is very common in programming. For example, C++ programming, you have to tell it what kind of an exit code that you expect it to return. And success is 0. So if we get a 0 exit code, that's very, very good. But if we get something else, we might have to deal with it. So let's see if we can try this out using the ping command. So this is actually kind of cool. Suppose that we come in here and we say ping.exe. That stands for Packet Internet Groper. I don't think it really means that, but somebody came up with that acronym definition. And what ping is doing is it's going out on the network and it's finding a host that you've told it to go find, and it's coming back and saying, okay, I've contacted this host, and here's the information I'm getting back. It's successful. It's not successful. It's successful. It's not successful. So, for example, we could ping. Let's say we're going to go ahead and ping. I'm going to give it a number of times. It's going to be 1, because if you don't do that by default, it will ping quite a few times. And then let's tell it that we want to look for Microsoft.com, for example. And so it found it, and it replied to us, and it gave us the IP address for Microsoft.com. And it only did 1. Let me show you what would happen if I clear the screen, hit my up arrow, and I get rid of this count here. Let's find out how many times it counts. Now Linux will count forever. It has to be limited. Windows counts 4 times, and then after that it won't stop. It will stop. So Linux won't stop, but Windows will, and it stops after 4 times. Nonetheless, what you can do is if you're testing this thing, you can say, okay, I only want to try this 1 time. Now what happens if we put in something funky that we know is not out there? Thisbadsite.com. I bet it doesn't exist, but let's see if it does. Could not find thisbadsite.com. Okay, beautiful. Now what we want to do is we want to give in last exit code. So I'll type in $last exit code, and it's going to tell me that it returned a 1. What does that mean? Well, it means that we ran the ping executable. We told it to find this site here. Just do it 1 time. You don't have to do it 4 times like default, and in Linux it doesn't stop. And then we told it, okay, what was the exit code? So it went out, tried to find thisbadsite.com, could not find it, came back and said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't find this. And it put up a return code of 1, which to say is bad juju. Well, let's try that with our Microsoft site then. So I'm going to up arrow here. I'm going to try it here, ping exe Microsoft.com. Boom. And it gives me the 4 shots on this thing. Clear the screen. Now let's see what our last exit code was. It is exit code 0, which means success. Another programming word that you're going to hear quite often is called a stream. And so the idea is you're sitting at your keyboard and you're typing. You have a stream established with the computer, and the computer is intercepting everything that you're typing. So you can think of it as you're typing, you're just putting all this data on the screen or inside the computer that is streaming to the computer, and it's doing something with this. Now there are 4 streams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 streams that we need to be concerned about. There's an error stream, which is going to notify you of errors. There's a warning stream, a verbose stream. Verbose means on and on and on. Tell me everything. I want to know everything. Like when you're viewing logs, for example, and you want to see everything that's going on. If you put it in verbose mode, it's going to show you everything that's happening. There's a debug string, and there's an information string. So these are streams. I said string, but I meant stream. There are 5 of them. And what we want to do is we want to first of all look and see what they are. So I'm going to type in the command like get variable. And we've already worked with this get tag variable before. Variable. I'm going to give it a name. And I'm going to use a wildcard here. So I'm going to say star preference. These are called preference variables. And what it literally means, you're setting your preference for the way that certain variables are going to act, or the kind of data that they're going to return back to you. So let's see what we've got. We've got several here: confirm, debug, error action, information preference, progress preference, and so on. So these are preference variables, and these are their default settings. And you can see here, for example, one is silently continue. So if we're debugging and everything's cool, it's just going to silently continue. If we get an error, it's going to continue. If we get information, it's going to silently continue. That's the idea. All right, so we're showing what our preference variables are. And what we're really doing is we're saying PowerShell, show me the name of any variables that have this star, means that starts with something but has preference in its name. And so that's what you're looking at here. Okay, now what happens if we decide that we want to set a variable? So we're going to set a variable. I'm going to say that I'm going to get tac variable, and I'm going to put a name in here, and you can put any name that you want. And I'm going to say that non-existent or non-existent. And I'm going to get an error that's thrown to me. And the reason it's throwing this error is because it doesn't see this variable called non-existent out there. Well, what would happen if we wanted to go get past that? So what we would do, I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to go out to one of these preference variables called error action preference. In other words, if there's an error of some kind that occurs, I don't want you to tell me about it. I want you to just continue going. And the way that we do this is we just tell it to silently continue. Continue like that. There we go. That's a string that I'm passing in. Okay, now we've got that variable out there. We can look and see if we've got it by just telling it to show us the preference variables. Error action preference now is set for silently continue. All right, let's go ahead and do that does not exist again right here. And this time it just blows right by it. Why? Because we have error action preference set to silently continue. It's not going to notify us about this particular error. It's something that you want to be aware of. All right, let me clear the screen now. Now, I've talked about data types before. There are some data types you need to be aware of. So you have what's called an integer. You're going to see that abbreviated as int, int. For example, if you're doing some C or C++ programming, you'll declare a variable as an integer. You'll say int variable name equals whatever it equals. That's one. There's another one called a boolean, and it's abbreviated as bool. It's either true or false. There's a float. There are some others. So let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to say that my var is going to be equal to 1. And I'm just going to go ahead and have it print out what the contents of my var is. This is an int. And so if you're working in, say, Visual Basic, don't, but if you're working in Visual Basic and you have a text box and you're getting data that somebody has keyed in inside that text box, this is true for Java or C++, C, other languages. But if you have this text box here and you're retrieving information out of the text box, it is not an int. It is not a number. It is a string. And so you're going to have to convert that number, that data, into a number so that you can do mathematics operations with it. But in this case, it really does contain the number 1. Well, what if we put in here that we want it to contain the string 1? So I'll have it output that. Sure enough, it takes it just fine. Can I use double quotes with this 1 instead? So very often, with the exception of Python, very often we're really particular about whether we can use ticks or double quotes. Now in this case, we can use ticks to declare a string You would never get away with that in C++. It will not allow that because this is considered to be a char, one letter, one character. However, in PowerShell and in Python, we can use ticks or double quotes, and it will happily see that as a string, like so. Okay, well, what about if we wanted to do a variable like a Boolean? So here's a Boolean, so I'm just going to say that it is true. And then if I hit my up arrow here, it is true. Now notice that it capitalized true, which is fine. And what we're saying here is it's either true or false. Booleans are used very often in coding when we want to set what's called a flag. We want to find out if an action has occurred, and so we declare a flag, and we set it to either true or false. And then if the action occurs, we set the flag to the opposite side of the Boolean. It's very, very useful stuff right there. And then we have to fiddle around. I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen. I'm going to put the number 1 back in here. My var equals just number 1. We need to be sure that we're understanding ints versus floats. So right now this is an integer, and you can issue a PowerShell command that will tell you what value is in there. If this is like an integer or if it's a different kind of a number, that's going to be important to you. So what you do is you type in the variable name, and in this case it's myvar. And I'm going to put in an operator here called getType. And I want it to tell me what the name of this is. So what this is going to do is tell me the type of data that is currently stored in my var. So we're telling it, okay, I want you to go into my var here. I want you to run the getType method, which is going to bring back something to you. It's going to return, we use the word return, it's going to return something to me, and we want it to return the name. And it says, oh, I'm an int 32. Well, this is a 32-bit integer number. Now what happens if we set this thing to, say, 1.5? This is not an int. This is going to be, in Microsoft's lineage, a double. So let's go get the type name here, double. Now you can do a thing called casting where you can force PowerShell to not consider this to be a double. We'll talk more about doubles and floats in a minute. But in this case, suppose that you said, you know what, I just want you to consider my var like this to be an integer right now. What we're doing is we're casting it. We're saying take the number that's currently in there, 1.5, and just chop it right off at the decimal. All we want to see is the integer value out of this number. Boom, like that. So that's what you're doing. You're casting it here. This is a very common technique where you're saying, I know you want to represent the data to me this way, but here's the kind of data that I really want to see, at least temporarily. Now you should know that Microsoft Visual Studio and most of Microsoft land enjoys a double. There's another data type called a float. These two are pretty similar. That has to do with the amount of data that can be stored in a memory variable in this case. But you should be aware that for the most part, by default, Microsoft likes to see a double. Okay, now let's talk about, we're going to put some variables together to do some work, and we're also going to work with strings. So let's say that we've got a string out here called greetings. Greetings, Earthling. And I'm going to set it equal to a string. Welcome to my spaceship, abductee. I have this weird thing about alien abductions. It's a thing. Don't judge me for it. It's just a thing. I'm always interested in how aliens can come and suck cows up into a UFO. So I've been obsessed with this alien abduction thing for a while. It's very weird. So we've got this thing out here. And now let's go ahead and say, welcome to my something or other. And I'm going to say that my spaceship, I'll declare a spaceship here. Spaceship. I'm going to put this in all proper case just to be a very logical and follow the same rules all the time. And my spaceship, I'm going to say, is going to be called a UFO, like that. Okay. Now we can modify this sentence here, and wherever we have spaceship, instead what we can put in is we can put in the variable name. So we can put in spaceship. And this is pretty cool because what will happen is we're telling PowerShell that we have a sentence here called Greetings Earthling. The sentence says, welcome to my spaceship. Initially it said that, abductee. We created a variable called spaceship and populated it with the data UFO. And now we're putting this as a placeholder in here. So you can think of $spaceship as a placeholder that holds the value UFO. And yes, you can combine these together like this. And so let's print out Greetings Earthling. Greetings Earthling. Boom. Welcome to my UFO abductee. So that's how that works. And you can put as many variables as you want inside. And so this is a string. Notice that we use double quotes here. And then when I had a single one, I put single quotes here. But again, I want to reiterate to you that in C++ and C, you can't get away with this. A single tick means that you're using a letter, a character, a number, just one. Double quotes means that you're using a string. Now another thing that we could do, suppose that we didn't have a spaceship, we could put in here space _ ship, and I'm going to put capital ship there. You can put in blanks here. So if you just do tick tick with nothing in between, what you're doing is you're declaring this variable, and it's the same thing as null. You're blanking it out. There's nothing inside the variable. That will work as well. So you can use that as a variable placeholder for yourself as well. Okay, so I think I've gone far enough today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to my site if you like this, my channel, because I enjoy viewers watching my videos and contacting me, leaving messages. I'm fine with that. Thank you and have a lovely, lovely day, and I will talk to you in the next video.